Hello and welcome to Captain's Dry Dock, and in the dry dock today we are redeveloping my Star Trek The Next Generation / Voyager / Deep Space Nine rank pips. Let's make it so. Okay, so Mark III, what happened to Mark I and Mark II? Well, Mark I is actually on the playlist on this channel. The link is down below. And essentially all it was 4 magnets that were painted, and I set onto a backplate that I 3D printed and designed myself. That was okay until I uploaded it onto the forums and onto Facebook, and then someone reached out to me and said, would I mind actually accepting any constructive criticism? Well, of course, yes. If they had better measurements or better advice of how to make them, yes. And it turned out they had access to the screen used pips, measured them, and supplied those measurements to me, which are here. So if you want to make your own, here you go, have a stab at it yourself. So there was no way I could just leave that there and just go around just wearing those pips, knowing in my head they weren't accurate. They were fine if you were standing further away, but for me, it was bugging me. So I was going to make a Mark II. So with a Mark II was going to be slightly different. In fact, it's almost how the originals were made. Well, not the originals. I think Anavos make it in this way, where you've got a magnet inside housing. Well, they got metal housing, but I was going to 3D print mine. So what I did, I made the pips again in Fusion 360, 3D printed them in the with PLA, a filament printer, and then I made a mold and cast them in resin, and then the little magnet went inside there and that was put onto the same backplate. Now that was fine, the measurements were great, it looked fantastic, everyone seemed to be really happy with them, but for me, it was bugging me. There was something more I could do to make them more perfect, and that's what's over my shoulder. This is a 3D printer, but what makes it special, it's a resin 3D printer, and it's super precise, meaning there's no, well, you can't even see layers, which means there's little to no finishing involved when you printed something, and I can incorporate details like this. I can put text at the back of the backplate. Now, this is not canon. If you look at the originals on this TV show, if you manage to get pictures of those, they didn't have that at all. And in fact, a lot of companies like Anavos will actually put stuff on the back, such as trademarks and years and whatnot to do with the actual item being sold. But with Captain's Dry Dock, I want to make something feel like it's from that world. So I'm not gonna have CBS or Anavos or whatever it is on the back, the trademarks of the company making it. I wanted it to be Starfleet issue and stating the rank of those pips. Now, you never know, in the 23rd century, they may still be using magnets. And that's what I loved about the Mark IIIs. I was able to update and incorporate a few more little details. Also, the incremental pip, the Mark II, I used a decal to get that black circle. But with the 3D resin printer, I was able to do it much more accurately and put in the indents because it's a slight dish. If you look on the side profiles, such as here, you'll see it's slightly embossed, and then you put the black paint in there, and then you put like a gloss varnish on top, and that's accurate to the studio props. Now, that's what this is. This is the 3D printer. This is something I invested in and I absolutely love this. This was around about £230, and the resin's a little bit more pricey, but the quality is fantastic because with the resin printer, unlike my filament printer, you don't get those layer lines, which means it comes out perfect, well, practically perfect. And especially for scales like that, this is the item you want if you want to get into 3D printing, if you want to print small items. If you want to print big items, by all means, but it costs a little bit more. And that's what was different about the Mark IIIs. This could all be done on this printer, little manual labor, and it was going to come out perfectly every single time. And I love this machine. Now, what's next to it? Tweedledum, Tweedledee. I need to give a better name. Shall we say Picard and number 1? This is the wash and cure station. You don't have to have one of these, but I thought to myself, in for a penny, in for a pound. So essentially what this does, once this is printed, you take your print over here and it's like a washing machine, and it washes all the residue, the resin that wasn't required off, and then once you take it out, let it dry, put it back in again, it bombards it with UV light, and UV light cures the resin. And that's it, about I think 5-6 minutes in there, and what you get are resin pips and anything else you want to make. So these These are my companions on Captain's Dry Dock. You may be seeing them a little bit more in the future, and I just wanted to introduce you to them. So this is the reason for the Mark III Pips, and I hope you really like them because I really enjoyed this build. As I already made the Pips in Fusion 360 with my Mark IIs, it meant I didn't have to start from scratch as the design is perfect. However, I'll show you how I made the single Pip, which was later replicated 4 times to make the rank of Captain. This is super easy to do, especially if you want to give it a go yourself and are new to 3D CAD packages. First, I made a circle and extruded it to the correct height. Then I made another circle which was smaller and extruded that so it cut into the solid that I already created. This was done to the precise dimensions of the magnet that would later be housed inside with glue. To make the incremental black Pip, I just had to do the same thing but on the other side, but make the cut really shallow where it would later be painted black and then gloss varnish added later to give the shiny look. To send the 3D file to the printer, it had to be prepared in a slicer program. This is a program that mimics the 3D printer virtually and allows you to position the Pips on a virtual bed. Then supporting legs are added by the program automatically and can be edited later. This is so the Pips don't fall back into the tray of liquid resin, as printing them directly onto the bed will warp them and give them something which is called an elephant foot appearance, which you don't want. The next step is to pour the resin into the tray. Up until recently, 3D printing resin required alcohol post-printing to clean up everything. But now you can get resins that are specially made so that water can be used instead. This cuts down costs and also means you don't have to play around with super strong spirits as well. The print file is ready and transferred via a USB, plugging it into the printer, selecting File, which is shown as a handy thumbnail image, and then press print. So you're probably asking, what am I doing outside in January in the UK when it's cold and damp with a 3D printer with a blanket over it? Well, quite simply, this resin stinks to high heaven. Now, there's loads of advice that actually warn you to do it in a well-ventilated area. Yes, you should do it in a well-ventilated area, but this stuff still stinks. Now, I've had all the windows open, and if you do live in an apartment or a small place where you're doing 3D printing, I do not recommend it because it will start giving you headaches and everything will start smelling. So I've opted to do it outside. Now, I've done it once before and it's worked out perfectly, but the perils of doing it outside is essentially, well, the weather, and also it's cold and I'm on the floor, and also I need to protect the machine from any like dampness as well, hence the fact I've got a blanket on the top. So be warned, if you are going to do it outside and you live in a country like the UK when it's quite often damp, just make sure you cover up your machine. But I've done it once before and it's worked out fantastic. Now, the other perils of actually printing outside, I can't believe this is a subject, not that you should be doing that, is that this sets or cures using UV light, ultraviolet light. So basically the sun, which being outdoors is a terrible thing to do, but thankfully this machine comes with this red box here, and this red box actually stops the UV light from hitting the resin before it's printing and solidifying it. When I did my first print outside and I was cleaning up the tray, I noticed there was a skin forming on top of the resin that wasn't actually used for printing. It's a bit like hot chocolate when you leave it there too long and there's a thin skin from the milk. That's what that was like, and I started panicking. So what I started to do now is to make sure that after printing I bring it indoors and I take the box off, and a very short period of time where the resin is actually indoors and it doesn't have enough time to actually stink out my entire apartment. So be warned, if you are going to get a resin printer or you're doing resin printing, do it in a well ventilated area in a place where you're not going to bug anyone else or get headaches, and if not, and you live in a nice hot country, do it outdoors, but be careful with the UV light. When you do take this box off, make sure you do it inside. Now indoors and out of the miserable UK weather, the plate is angled with a bracket supplied with the printer. This allows the residue to drip back into the tray so it can be collected and used again later. The great thing about resin printing is that any resin that's not used can be poured back into the bottle using a filter and used over and over again, just so long there's no debris from the tray that's left over from the last print. Although it looks solid, the resin is still a little soft and needs to cure to become hard. This means it has to be transferred to the washing and cure station. Like I mentioned before, this is like a washing machine that's just full of water and will remove any residue resin on the model. Once washed, using a scraper, I carefully remove the pips from a plate and then leave them to dry on a paper towel. Once dry, I transfer them back to the same station but replace the water vat with a turntable. This will spin slowly around as I change the mode to cure and press play. This will bombard the pips with strong UV light, which will make them cure faster. After several minutes, these are ready to have the supporting legs snapped off and ready to be painted immediately. To help with painting, I made a jig from wooden spatulas and toothpicks. This helped me easily maneuver the pips as I painted, and also kept them from blowing away as I was using an airbrush. After spraying them with grey primer and then black paint, which is an ideal colour when you're aiming for a metallic finish, I used Games Workshop Retribution Armour. After 3 coats, they really look beautiful, and as you can see, I've invested in an expensive but really good vapour mask. It's really important to wear a mask, even for localised small projects such as this, because as you can see, it's incredible how much paint lingers in the air that would have later been breathed in if it wasn't for this mask. Now the last stage, magnets. With a little touch of super glue, I carefully placed the super strong tiny magnets inside. By the way, it was really important that I made sure the facing polarity of the magnets was correct, as when I first did this, the pips jumped away from the magnets on the back plate, so each one has to be tested before installing. Before I forget, I did actually make the card show rank pips as well, using the exact same methods. Now, if you have any ideas of precise measurements of the actual studio used ones, please list them down below, because this was all done by eye, and so far I think they look pretty good, but you can tell me otherwise.